Most people who escape the financial trap never announce it. They don't post about it. They don't sell a course. They don't tell you at dinner. One day, they're just gone, out of the cycle, and nobody around them quite understands how it happened, because from the outside, it didn't look like anything dramatic. They just started thinking differently at some point, and that change in thinking had a very specific, very quiet financial logic behind it. Today, we're going to look at exactly what that logic is, and more importantly, why most people never find it. Let's take a real person, not a case study, just someone who could be you, or your colleague, or your roommate from college. His name is Daniel. He's 31. He lives in a mid-sized city, let's say Chicago, or Manchester, or Frankfurt. Daniel earns $68,000 a year before tax. After federal and state taxes, Social Security, health insurance deductions, he takes home roughly $4,100 a month. His monthly picture looks like this. Rent, $1,450, because he lives somewhere decent. Not luxury, just decent. He did the math and it felt reasonable. Car payment, $380. Financed over 60 months. Insurance on top of that, $140. Gas and maintenance, another $120. So the car, total, is costing him $640 a month. Student loan, $310. Groceries, utilities, subscriptions, phone, roughly $600. That's $3,000 gone before Daniel has had a single discretionary thought. He has $1,100 left, and with that $1,100, he lives his actual social life. Dinners out, a weekend trip twice a year, clothes, birthday gifts, the occasional concert. At the end of a good month, Daniel saves maybe $200. On a bad month, he saves nothing. Sometimes he adds a little to the credit card. Daniel is not reckless. Daniel is not lazy. Daniel is not stupid. Daniel is just fully subscribed to the system as it was designed. Here's the thing most people miss. Daniel's problem isn't that he spends too much on coffee. His problem is structural, and it's almost invisible because it looks completely normal. Let's look at just the car. Daniel bought a $26,000 car because the monthly payment felt manageable. $380 a month. That's the number he focused on, not $26,000, the monthly number. Over 60 months, at a typical 7% auto loan rate, Daniel will pay approximately $30,800 for that car. Not $26,000, $30,800. And here's the part that rarely gets said. By the time that loan is done, the car is worth maybe $12,000. So, in 5 years, Daniel has spent $30,800 to own something worth $12,000. The real cost of that decision is closer to $19,000. Now, none of that is illegal. None of it is even unusual. Millions of people do exactly this every year in the US and across Europe. The dealership showed him a monthly number, and the monthly number felt fine. This is what behavioral economists call payment decoupling, when the pain of paying is separated from the moment of deciding. You feel the $380 in small, manageable doses. You never feel the $30,800 all at once, so your brain approves the decision. And this exact same mechanism applies to Daniel's apartment, his phone upgrade, his credit card purchases. He's not buying things, he's buying monthly payments, and there is a fundamental difference between those two things. Why does this happen to intelligent, educated people? Because we are wired, genuinely wired, to prioritize what is immediate and concrete over what is distant and abstract. $380 is real. It's next month. It fits in Daniel's budget. It's manageable. $19,000 in lost wealth over 5 years is abstract. It's invisible. It has no emotional weight. This isn't a character flaw. It's called hyperbolic discounting, the human tendency to value the present far more than the future, even when the future cost is dramatically larger. What makes this particularly dangerous in the modern economy is that the entire consumer finance industry is built around this bias. Every payment plan, every zero down, every 90 days same as cash offer, these are engineered to exploit the gap between how your brain weighs now versus later. And it works, not on foolish people, on normal people, on most people. There's a second layer to this. Daniel doesn't just have a spending problem, he has an identity problem. At 31, a certain car, a certain apartment, a certain phone, these are not luxuries, they are social signals. They communicate that you're doing fine, that you're keeping up. The psychological cost of not keeping up, the subtle shame, the feeling of falling behind, is often more painful in the short term than the financial cost of the payments, so people pay month after month, and they call it living.
Let's stay with Daniel for a moment longer. At his current trajectory, Daniel roughly saves $150 to $200 on average every month. Over 10 years, at a modest 7% return in an index fund, that grows to approximately $26,000. Now let's imagine a version of Daniel who made one structural adjustment at age 28. He chose a $16,000 used car instead of a $26,000 financed one. That $300 a month invested over 10 years at 7% becomes roughly $52,000. Not from working harder, not from a side hustle, from redirecting money that was already leaving his account, just redirecting it differently. The difference between these two Daniels at 38 is not discipline, it's not income. It's the moment one of them paused and asked, am I buying a thing or am I buying a monthly payment? That one question, asked consistently, is worth tens of thousands of dollars over a decade, quietly, without drama, without sacrifice that feels like sacrifice. People who quietly exit this cycle don't have secret knowledge. They don't follow unusual strategies. What they have is a different relationship with financial decisions. Specifically, they've learned to convert monthly costs into total costs before they feel anything about a purchase. When they see a $400 monthly payment, they don't see $400. They automatically see the full number, the total outflow, the opportunity cost, what that money could have become. They've also made peace with the specific kind of social discomfort. They drive the less impressive car. They live in the slightly smaller apartment. They don't always have the newest phone, not because they're frugal in some performative way, but because they've genuinely stopped caring what those signals communicate to people who aren't paying their bills. That detachment from social signaling is not natural. It's learned, and it's usually learned through one specific experience: the first time you watch a small financial decision compound into something real. The other thing these people tend to share, they think about freedom in concrete terms. Not, I want to be free, but at this amount saved per month, I could cover 3 months of expenses in an emergency. Freedom to them is a number, and numbers are something you can actually work towards. The rat race is not a conspiracy. It's not designed by anyone evil. It's just the natural result of a system where consumer finance is highly profitable, where social comparison is constant. Most people stay in it, not because they can't leave, but because they never clearly see the mechanism keeping them there. The people who leave quietly are, in most cases, ordinary earners. They don't make dramatically more money than you. They just started seeing their financial life in total costs instead of monthly payments, and they stopped needing their spending to communicate to anyone. That shift doesn't require a course, a guru, or a crisis. It just requires looking clearly and calmly at what the numbers actually say. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, consider subscribing. There's more like this. No hype, just a clear look at how money actually works.